when we talk basically about data analysis, the main goal is really to explore and interpret data, to extract insights, identify trends, patterns, and potentially answer a specific question. But it's really about understanding what the data is trying to tell us, basically. On the other hand, data modeling is more about creating a mathematical representation of a process or a system, and this helps us describing the relationship between inputs and outputs.
Welcome to the Smart Biotech Scientist podcast. I'm your host, David Bullman, and today we are diving into the revolutionary world of digital bioprocess development. We're about to explore how models are transforming the industry with our guest, Fabian Feidl, who is the co-founder and CTO of DataHow. We'll be talking about process models, getting from raw data to actionable insights, and the AI revolution, and a lot more. Are you ready to decode the future of bioprocessing? Let's get started. Are you juggling the complexities of CMC development while trying to enjoy the beauty of biotech? Have you ever wondered if there's a way to simplify bioprocessing? Welcome to the Smart Biotech Scientist podcast, where we're diving headfirst into the very challenges you face. We're breaking it down, demystifying the jargon, and giving you the keys to unlock your full potential. I'm your host, David Brohlman, and I get it. With 15 plus years in the biotech industry, I face the same challenges you do. There's a way to simplify and streamline so you can remove complexity, you can skip trials and errors, deliver without delay your groundbreaking therapy to clinics and market, and still enjoy every single step. Do you want to learn how industry experts and I did it? Grab a cup of coffee and your favorite notebook and pen. Now is the time to take your bioprocessing game to the next level. Let's smarten up biotech. Welcome, Fabian. Thank you for joining us today.
David, many thanks for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Fabian, share something that you believe about bioprocess development that most people disagree with.
That is a very good question. A question which I very often receive is whether process modeling is really truly necessary for bioprocess development. Some people may be very skeptical. I'm actually quite convinced that process modeling is not only beneficial, but actually essential. I believe it's even the key enabler for personalized medicine, and in fact, the only viable path to make personalized therapies a reality for a broader mass.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about process modeling today. But before we do that, Fabian, can you walk us through your journey from your studies at the university to co-founding DataHow, which is not a small company anymore? What pivotal moments did you experience along the way?
I think my fascination started actually when I was 12 years old. I did an internship at Boehringer Ingelheim, and I didn't understand much at that time. So I hadn't had any clue what's a pH, what's a media, what's a buffer, what's protein A. I really didn't get it. But I was absolutely amazed by the idea that you use hamster cells, genetically modify them, and then produce therapeutic proteins to treat cancer. So that experience completely blew my mind. And from that point on, I really knew that this is what I want to understand better. And after the high school, I had the opportunity to do my civilian service in a cancer rehabilitation clinic. And here it was really eye-opening for me because I got to see the patient side, right? And had incredibly meaningful conversation. This, I would say, fueled really my motivation to really study biotechnology and support in this field. And I think during my bachelor and master in pharmaceutical molecular biotechnology, which I really enjoyed, after that, I did a research project at the UCL in London, where I first got to work with robotic system for downstream experiments. And I was really, really interested in this automation and this thought about high throughput screening to make this process actually more efficient. And during my PhD at the ETH Zurich in the group of Professor Morbidelli, there was actually the first time when I was exposed to multivariate data analysis and modeling in a broader sense. Before that, I just knew design of experiments, right? How to perform the experiments, but modeling wasn't really covered in these biotech programs, at least by that time, completely forgot about. So discovering this whole new area was also a game changer for me. And more recent pivotal moment was during my MBA. Here I really got a better understanding of more the economic side of things, and this fully motivated to also explore and understand return of investments of our solutions, which we are building in DataHow, right? And also understand more the managerial perspective. So I think it's a lot of different pivotal moments, which really is valuable in the combination.
Wow, what a story. I love that you started your studies because you found a purpose. I mean, I find that very meaningful. It's very powerful to do that because you saw the benefit of it. I can relate that hearing that you can produce proteins in hamster cells, this is mind-blowing. I mean, the first time I heard it, it was the same thing for me, and it's still the same for some of my friends when I talk about it. And what is also mind-blowing now to many of us is actually the kind of digital technologies we have now at our disposal. So can you paint us a picture of how models are revolutionizing digital process development in our industry today?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But I think to really understand the impact, we need to understand the complexity of the industry. We are dealing with highly complicated processes involving this living organism, which means there are countless variables at play. We have a vast number of inputs and outputs to consider, not just the yield or product per se, but also the quality, right? So multiple critical quality attributes, which needs to be actually in specifications. And on top of that, the experiments are just extremely expensive and time consuming. The relationship between all these variables, which are, by the way, often nonlinear, makes it even more challenging to navigate and really understand. And this is where models come in. They really allow us to streamline these various stages from process development, like the optimization or screening at the beginning, then the scale up, the design space characterization, and later on manufacturing even enable a model-based control with forecasts and prediction that we can basically adjust the process in real time. Essentially, models help us make sense of all this complexity, reducing the costs, accelerate the development, and potentially even paving the way for more efficient and innovative biotech solutions.
Let's unpack everything from the beginning. During the introduction, you mentioned the word process models. And many of our listeners might be wondering, what exactly are process models and how do they differ from traditional methods or data analysis methods?
Actually, a really great question. And to be very frank, when I went to the ETH, I also hadn't had a clear understanding what models actually are. Of course, you know more or less what it is, but what it really means and how this can be translated into actions or decisions, it's on a different page. But let's go through it. And when we talk basically about data analysis, the main goal is really to explore and interpret data, to extract insights, identify trends, patterns, and potentially answer a specific question. But it's really about understanding what the data is trying to tell us, basically. On the other hand, data modeling is more about creating a mathematical representation of a process or a system. And this helps us describing the relationship between inputs and outputs. So for example, how does the temperature of the bioreactor affect the viable cell density? And if you have a model that accurately describes these relationships, you can do things like simulate different scenarios. What happens if I set the temperature to a certain value? Or you can even tell the model the output you want to achieve. Like, I want to have a specific title with a particular glycoprofile. And it will suggest you the optimal inputs you should use to achieve that. So it's more proactive and forward-looking approach because it lets you basically predict the outcomes and identify areas where you might need more data to improve your understanding. And if we further take a step and look into hybrid models, which we at DataHow strongly believe in, you're combining not just the insights captured in data, but you're actually also add our engineering know-how. So for instance, you can incorporate material balances, and use deterministic equations for parts you can describe, while using machine learning techniques to handle the rest. So this approach not only requires less data, but also extrapolates much better, providing more accurate and robust predictions. And I would say this is a significant step forward compared to data analysis.
So basically, it's not just reacting, it's actually proacting, right? You analyze your data and you can predict what's coming out and you can make smart choices much earlier.
Exactly.
If I use a very simplified language.
Yeah, I think that's the key point here. Absolutely.
So for those who are now thinking, okay, that's great, but what is the difference we're seeing or the benefit of it? Can you tell us the most exciting breakthrough you've seen using these kinds of models?
I think in the last couple of years, we had really many exciting breakthroughs. But if I would need to mention one, which really stands out to me, was when we applied our modeling technology to a CAR T-cell project. We were able to predict actually the outcome of the process over 3 cultivation pathogens based on the donor-related specification and, of course, the process condition. Just imagine the potential for personalized medicine, no? Being able to forecast how the process will play out in advance means we can, of course, proactively optimize the conditions, but we already have an understanding of how high the chance will be that we will have the material in the end, right? This is, I think, a game changer for the field and, of course, also for the patient who potentially doesn't need to go through these stress phases if we see maybe it's really not leading to something, right? Or we can allocate the resources to patients where we have a better likelihood of success. I think this enables really, as I said at the beginning, personalized medicine. We could show already in the first steps this progress here.
Wow, that's massive. That's a huge benefit. Very impressive. Now, let's get down to the nitty-gritty, because throughout my career, I've seen way too many meetings where we looked at data. So we were pretty good at collecting data, but we were not so good at making decisions. And I always wished that we would be more data-driven instead of gut-driven or just making decisions by feelings. So how can we as scientists use actually this power of these models to bridge the gap between the raw data and actionable insights to make informed decisions? I mean, it's finally about that at the end of the day. It's not just generating data, but it's actually making decisions. So how can we, from the raw data to really insights and then make decisions?
That's interesting. So I would say ideally, before you even start performing experiment and collecting raw data, you should actually begin with a well-thought experimental design. So if you're really starting from scratch with no data nor models, you begin with an initialization design. If you plan to use nonlinear techniques, I would just recommend avoid using the full factorial designs and really consider more Latin hypercube sampling. But that's not the topic for today. But it's very important that you start planning the experiments from the beginning. And once you've designed your experiments and collected the raw data, the next step is, of course, data analysis. That means you consolidate, you organize, you transform the data, you potentially engineer additional features, you remove outliers and potentially impute missing values dependent on which algorithms you're using. And after that, you train your model. And a very important step, which often gets forgotten, is the evaluation. So you really need to do a solid evaluation before drawing any conclusion on the model prediction capability. But once you have the model, very often the show stops here. But actually the important step follows after we having the model. The real value comes actually from connecting those insights to actions or decisions, as you said. If your model is reliable and confident, you can, for example, validate your hypothesis purely in silico. So you run with the model a virtual experiment. And if the model is confident, why should you do a wet lab experiment? If there are now gaps in the model confidence, you know exactly where to focus your next set of real experiment. So this is a new decision or new action you should take because you're not confident in this area. Of course, you should also judge, is this actually meaningful to me, this design area? and only balance this kind of area of interest versus likelihood of improvement. But it can serve as a very important metric where to perform the next experiments. And I think this iterative loop between data, modeling, experimentation is what really drives more informed and more effective decision-making in bioprocess development. It's really a guide from step to step through the different phases.
While this sounds all great, there are still many biotech companies who don't see the potential of digital technologies. I was actually shocked by looking at the latest, I think it's the industry trend or data, and there is, if I remember well, it's like 20% who are implementing digital technologies, but that means most of the companies are not using them at all. So what barriers are preventing a widespread adoption of model-based approaches?
I think the topic digitalization in general is not an easy thing. I think there are multiple barriers which can be potentially grouped in more or less three categories. Like there are technical challenges, there are financial ones, and organization. And I believe actually that the organizational challenges often seem to be the toughest to overcome. It actually starts with the fundamental question, should we develop software or models in-house, or should we partner with external solution provider? But beyond that, also a mindset is crucial. So you need a basic understanding actually of data science, data management, IT infrastructure, plus of course the domain expertise and a good sense for business strategy. Each of these fields has actually its own language. While it's potentially not necessary to be an expert in all of the fields, you need to have a basic grasp and trusting other expertise and being able to communicate across these disciplines. I think many stakeholders are actually involved to make digitalization a success. Here, I believe digital advocates can make a huge difference, especially if they're willing to change and in an environment that encourages learning over fear. I think it requires an agile and adaptive approach to work, quickly develop, test, iterate on software solution, develop standards or processes. And this kind of flexibility is, I think, what helps driving this real progress. However, also on the technological level, I believe a main challenge is, to be frank, there are a lots of number of software tools for operators and scientists, which they have to juggle daily. I was really impressed when I was asking an operator, could you please guide me through the different softwares you are using per day? There's so many different systems available, specialized for a particular application, like a process database, a device management, a lab journal, data visualization, experimental design of experiments, then a process control. You have modeling solutions. It lacks a complete standardization. So the data between those tools are just poorly integrated, and suboptimal APIs are actually available. So it's super complicated, time consuming, and just manually burdens, and very often based on Excel, right? Which is very error. I think this combination, the organizational and technological, is what we in DataHow would like to address with our product, DataHow Lab. And here, I think the vision is really that we provide a kind of uniformed platform that integrates with existing digital environments like databases, process control systems, and other IT environments. We don't want to replace these control systems, and we don't want to replace historians, because there are very good solutions on the market, but we just want to make sure that we are really well integrated. The platform is actually designed to really streamline advanced data analysis, modeling, these model-driven activities or the decisions which you mentioned, like assimilation, robustness analysis, experimental planning. So all this to streamline the different requirements from a user. But we would like to equip our platform also with the most advanced algorithms like hybrid modeling, transfer learning, and active learning to specifically tailored actually to the process units, because a bioreactor modeling approach looks different than a downstream approach. So the goal is really to make these powerful tools accessible, not just to data scientists, but more to process operator and biotech scientists. And I think we can achieve this by simplifying the workflow, hiding the complexities behind user interfaces. And I think this can help also reducing gaps and really improve the communication between these different stakeholders. So in short, I think digital tools have incredible potential, but you need to overcome organizational, technological hurdles. And of course, you have also financials. But what we usually see, there is budget available. If you can show return of investments, if you can show added value, the budget is there. And on the financial side, it's more how to evaluate the effectiveness of these tools and how to distribute the money appropriately.
And that wraps up part 1 of our deep dive into the world of digital process development with Fabian Feidl, who is the co-founder and CTO of DataHow. We have explored how models are revolutionizing biotech, from optimizing bioprocesses to enabling actionable insights from raw data. Thank you so much for tuning in. Part 2 will drop this coming Thursday. And perhaps you don't know where to start. As your fractional CTO, I'd love to help you identify the first low-hanging fruits. Just book a free call with me and I will help you get started. So thank you very much for tuning in. Until next time, this is David Perlman signing off. Stay smart, biotech scientists. All right, smart scientists. That's all for today on the Smart Biotech Scientist podcast. Thank you for tuning in and joining us on your journey to bioprocess mastery. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. By doing so, we can empower more scientists like you. For additional bioprocessing tips, visit us at smartbiotechscientist.com. Stay tuned for more inspiring biotech insights in our next episode. Until then, let's continue to smarten up biotech.